Hey kids, this is Adam. How you doing? You know, recently, and you probably, if you watch my channel, you probably know this. I'm talking to two different groups. One's online, and one is local. And talking about starting something like Lamentations of the Flame Princess. And in both cases, we're talking about playing. I'd like to play concurrently. They're just different areas of the world. We're playing something like 30 Years' War, 100 Years' War, 17, 16, 15th century Europe. And this is something that I wasn't really into a couple of years ago, and that is the kind of implied setting in Lamentations of the Flame Princess. But after playing something like All for One, Regime Diabolique, I'm not the biggest history person. Like I'm unaware of a lot of stuff. Fortunately, I have friends that are, and so I have to do some research. Talking to these groups, and I mentioned this in another video, they were both keen on playing in the real world with a twist. And so I've kind of wrapped my head around that more and more and become more interested in doing that. And maybe just because I started to really like the setting in All for One. I got a chance to check out some really cool things. So I watched a video by Tim Kask. Tim Kask has been doing this Curmudgeon in the Cellar. He started a YouTube channel, and that is just awesome. And the last one he did, I think it's like YouTube 2 or YT2. He talks about the supplements, and he talks about how magic users, a lot of magic user stuff was based on Doctor Strange, because both Gary Gygax and he were big Doctor Strange fans. And I remember loving Doctor Strange as a kid. I couldn't get enough of the comic books because I was so young. I couldn't buy them myself. But I love that vibe. I just love reimagining magic users in that way. And of course, it's a lot easier to do when you're thinking, okay, well, they might be in England, in the early 1700s or late 1600s. That all of a sudden becomes a lot more possible. You say, okay, I can see some kind of Doctor Strange sort of guy. And of course, I'm really into using the hopefully the VAM alternate rules from Free RPG Day, where magic users have access to some pretty powerful spells. Randomly they might, more powerful than they normally would. However, if they miscast, then horrible things can happen. I also checked out this thing. I think it's called Mockman. Never saw the blog before. But Mockman, he was talking about, I think it was a magic user in the 100 Years' War. And it was a very D&D focused article, but I believe for me I was able to look past the D&D-ism, not that I don't like D&D, and kind of transcend that and just think about like what would fit and what wouldn't fit. And I was especially looking at things like magic. And he broke it down to the old D&D schools of magic, like the evocation and whatever. But pretty much it boiled down to no fireballs in the street, or you better be darn careful. Like things like enchantment and illusion. Those things are a lot more. They fit a lot more with the stories we have about magic use and fae and all that sort of stuff. But once you get into more and more powerful wizardy effects that can pretty much fireballs and lightning bolts and all that sort of thing, you're talking about things where if wizards actually existed, they probably would have been taken over by governments because they'd be useful as weapons. Things like flying, things like teleporting, real world changers, not just game changers, but world changers. So you can have stuff like that in your game. Like I'm thinking, like, what could we use here? But of course, you have to be really careful about how you do it. There can't be a wizard around every corner. And I also like that idea, and it's very enforced in something like All for One, where there's the Inquisition. Whether you're an evil person or not, you're going to be accused of being a witch and Satan worship and all that sort of thing. So I'm really excited about exploring that, seeing how we can do that, and how that pans out. The funny thing is, I think 3 out of the 4 people I'm already talking about, are interested in playing magic users. I'm like, well, this could go really bad or really well, good. Not really sure. What could possibly go wrong? Couple magic users, Doctor Stranges, in England during the 30 Years' War, but possibly go wrong. One of the one of the neat things in the VAM magic system is there's that miscast table. And there's various things that could trigger a miscast roll. At that point, you roll a d12. The last 6 results are just generic. I mean, they run the gamut of being pretty nasty. You could live through them, but they can be kind of game changing. The other spells that are in that Free RPG Day supplement, the spells in there are nominally for women only, and they're pretty bizarre spells. But the first 6 results on that d12, well, they're spell specific. And so, people are saying, well, what are you going to do? You have to write like those first 6 die results for every single spell. I think there's like 165 in Lamentations of the Flame Princess or something. And no, of course not. I mean, I've made miscast or what do you call it, like failure tables before. I'm thinking, okay, well, you make them kind of generic, and then you use common sense. Maybe you can have this dialogue after somebody miscasts, and you talk, well, what's this going to look like? And so I kind of came up with one where I'm talking about, okay, well, maybe you have one result where maybe there's some kind of physical or mental aberration that happens to the caster, or maybe to somebody that's close to them, or maybe the spell becomes much more powerful, affects a greater area, range, time, whatever. You figure out the details. So what does that actually mean? Maybe the opposite effect occurs, and you have to determine what exactly is the opposite effect. And I would say opposite effect, and probably not all that nice. And so does that mean it gets reflected back to the caster? Does that mean that the target actually ends up getting something good happening? What exactly is the opposite of this? And there's a lot of leeway. Like, what is that really? Depending on what spell it is, you can get very, very creative. And I think I put one down, where maybe something related to the spell affects the caster, from now on. And I just, as I thought about that, and thought about these two magic users in England, what could possibly go wrong? I'm thinking, what if one of the guys, rolls Raise Dead as one of his spells? He does it, he miscasts, and okay, well now something happens where, how about every time he walks past anything that's dead, it just kind of animates, whether it's a rat, a plant, bugs, people, if he goes by a funeral, they just animate for a little while. They don't necessarily animate forever. Be damned inconvenient, don't you think? And for the rest of your life. What could possibly go wrong? So I'm really enjoying that. Not just a thought experiment, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how this actually pans out. Because once again, if you're a magic user, you're Doctor Strange. Doesn't matter what game you're playing. I don't care if it's All for One or Lamentations of the Flame Princess or whatever. You start doing that sort of stuff. You start getting those kind of effects. Around a culture that is believes in the supernatural. Probably actually, if you did it in 2017 too, pretty bad stuff would happen. Or you have to be careful what you do. You can't advertise who and what you are. So this isn't necessarily. I didn't want to make a video just about magic, but it really kind of got me thinking. I'm really kind of pumped to check this out. So I'm enjoying so far where the discussions are going, and I'm looking forward to actually seeing how it pans out. As we explore some characters in those settings, and probably do some things where things are mostly normal, but it's this world with a twist. And I mentioned before in the other video that, of course, probably the farther away you get from Europe, the weirder things you're going to get, and that's a conceit. I feel bad saying that because but that's just a conceit of that time period. Just like something like Leagues of Adventure, the heart of darkest Africa and the Amazon, they are unknown things. Those are the last great places that are unexplored, and the Arctic Circle and all that sort of thing. The depths of the deep Australia, what could possibly be there? Or heck, in the 30 Years' War, we're talking about the Americas, like where I live. What's in the middle of that continent? And so I'm enjoying the idea that once they get away from the epicenter and normal society, then we'll find out. And we can go down some rabbit holes. And I don't mean it's going to turn to fantasy land, but there could be really some weird stuff. Of course, there could be some weird stuff in your backyard too. So that's enough of me just kind of talking about that. So what are you doing in the game lately?